Hi everyone, this is Eric Dingding from ObTech M11, and it's been a while since we have seen each other due to our synchronous and asynchronous schedule. However, we believe that learning never stops. Now, I have a question. Have you ever wondered about the education system here in the Philippines? If yes, then that's good because right now we will be traveling back to the old times. So today, we are going to dive deeper into the pre-Spanish period, and throughout this report, we are going to know and discuss about the timeline, the highlights, the aims of education, and the impact on the present education of the pre-Spanish period. But before we proceed with our discussion, allow me to introduce to you my co-reporters for this topic, Mr. Richard Corato, Ms. Linen Dagaang, and Ms. Lovelyn Dinata. Alright, so let us proceed with our discussion. So now, let us discuss about the timeline. While we were searching about the timeline of the pre-Spanish period, the information was really vast. As we all know, that during the pre-Spanish period, most of the events are not really recorded through proper writing, but it was transferred orally. So the pre-Spanish period started before 1521, and it is a time where the Spaniards were not yet in our country, and it is also referred as the pre-Hispanic period. So the education in the Philippines was not formal, and the education was oral, practical, and hands-on, and we can really say that they teach their children in order to survive. The type of education that was taught was one of beliefs and tradition. So, pre-Spanish period educators were Babaylan and Catalunan. However, I do believe that the greatest educators during that time are the parents. So right now, we are going to move on the highlight of the pre-Spanish education. And in this part, we are going to have an in-depth discussion of what really happened during this time. So the first one that we are going to talk about is the type of education. It was really informal and unstructured as the students acquired their knowledge through observation, imitation, and practice. It was also decentralized as population and industry was distributed from urban to outlying areas wherein skills vary industries and locations, such as if you are living along seaside, you must be skillful in fishing, and if you are living at the mountain, then you must know how to hunt, or you must know how to grow various plants so that you can survive. They also use unique writing that is called baybayin. So the inhabitants of the Philippines were considered literate because of their own system of writing, and that is called alibata, an ancient writing system that was used by the Filipinos before. And baybay means to spell. And you know what? It was really used for communication. And just what I have mentioned earlier, that the main teacher before were the parents. So the father trained their sons to be warriors, hunters, fishermen, miners, lumbermen, shipbuilders, not depending on the location and the industry. So the mother teach their daughters to cook, to garden, in serving and in doing household acts, and more vocational trainings and less in academics was really focused before. Children were given basic principles or elements or fundamental skills both academic and vocational, yet they give much effort on vocational trainings headed by their father or mother. So this time, I'm going to forward you to a new reporter that will discuss the rest of the topic.
The educational aims are survival, conformity, and enculturation. Basic the education in this era is more vocational training that they were taught skills that they can use to stay in life and to adapt the agricultural patterns of the society, which people learn to dynamics of surrounding culture and equip values and norms. During the pre-colonial, most were being provided solely vocational training, which was supervised by parents and tribal tutors for those assigned specialized roles within their community. For example, the babaylan. So, there was no travel training curriculum since the development of the childhood to learn the imprinted and the culture of the people born for their needs, custom, and tradition. Again, the education during this period providing more vocational training and lesser academics because its educational system is more focusing for their needs. Teaching and learning focuses on the following aspects: behavior, skills, communication. Let's talk about the behavior. It's engaging with the oral tradition, which implies the value of the children. So, when we hear the word of oral, it means a verbal communication. In the picture given, it shows that they are having storytelling and sharing their own literature, which they have more lesson and includes legend, folk stories, and etc. Parents and tribal tutors are most likely to provide the oral tradition and instruction. Early Filipinos already have their oral literature, which was passed from generation to generation. Originally, through an oral tradition, the content of the literature is related to the common of the people in the village or society. So, it's more than the object of the nature, village food gathering, work in home, field forest, or sea, or caring for children, and many more. Let's move on to the second aspect, skills. Involves practical enhanced activity that develop and enhance the physical development. As this education focused on vocational training, male and female was trained in different ways. Parents trained their children, informed that they touch survival skills even through the group harmony skills that would vary on the industry and location, whether highland, lowland, and seashore. For example, in the picture, father trained son in hunting, carpentry, agriculture, shipbuilding, and mining. Also, mother educate their daughter in housekeeping, weaving, basket making, and other agricultural activity. Communication. People this era is usually write in stone and woods. Implies the use of traditional ways of writing, reading, and so-called of a bayin, and also known as alibata. During this early period, almost everyone in the society, male or female, knows to read and write. They have their own methods of writing, which they have used sharp, pointed tools like leaves, bamboos, and trunk skin, and they have write to top to bottom and read it to left to right. Also, alibata or baypayin was composed of 17 symbols representing of the letter of the alphabet. Among these 17 symbols are 3 vowels and 14 consonants.
Before the Spaniards came to our country, Filipinos already know how to read and write because of their unique writing system called alibata or commonly known as baybayin. In this part, I'm going to tackle about the methods of education during the pre-Spanish period. The first method of education during this period is observation. Just like in primitive education, the education during this period was informal and unstructured. The parents were expected to train their children and show to them how a certain task is done. The young children observe their elders doing works, for example, basket making, weaving, and hunting. The second method is practical. As we observe in this period, the children were provided more on vocational training and less in academics, so everything they learned was for the means of livelihood. As I mentioned earlier, the parents teach and train their children doing survival skills like hunting and farming. The information was not transferred through proper writing, but it was transferred orally and acquired through observation, imitation, and practice. The last method is imitation. During this period, children imitate or follow elders how things were done step by step and applied it in their daily lives. That is how they enhance their survival skills. Parents taught their children by showing exactly how things were done. They explained to them their beliefs for the new generation to capture in their daily lives the essence of ancient society. Then, in turn, they had to pass the same to the next. These parents serve as teachers in actual apprenticeship. Informal education is what they have. Ideas and facts were acquired through suggestions, observation, example, and imitation. There is no direct teaching, no formal method of information. That was how the Filipinos in pre-Spanish period able to learn.
From being in love with guitar-based musical arrangements to embracing the Spanish telenovela culture in early 1990s, the Philippines have a long-term relationship with the Spanish culture. From history to present, the Spanish influence in the country and its people continue to amaze a lot of other nations. Spanish friars and missionaries educated the natives and converted indigenous populations to Catholic faith. King Philip II's Leyes de Indias, Law of Indies, mandated the Spanish authorities in the Philippines to educate the natives, to teach them how to read and write in Spanish language. Spanish education played a significant role in that transformation. The oldest universities, colleges, vocational schools, and the first modern public educational system in Asia were created during the colonial period. Education was still in the early stage of development during the Spanish period. Even by the late 19th century, the Spanish language was still unknown to a significant majority. They were literate in their own native dialects. The Spanish aristocracy tried to distinguish themselves from the Indians with the use of language and level education. During the early years of Spanish colonization, education was mostly religion-oriented and controlled by Roman Catholic Church. Spanish friars and missionaries educated the natives through religion with the aim of converting indigenous populations to Catholic faith. The system of writing during the Spanish regime was Latin alphabet. The Augustinians opened a school immediately upon arriving in Cebu in 1565. The Franciscans arrived in 1577 and they too immediately taught the people how to read and write, besides imparting to them important industrial and agricultural techniques. One major failure of religious congregations' educational system was unwillingness of the Filipinos to learn other bodies of knowledge. Education during the Spanish regime was privileged only to Spanish students. Several educated Filipinos, referred to as ilustrados, began movements directed towards change in the system of government in the Philippines. Colegio de Santa Provinciana was the first school and college for girls that opened in the Philippines in 1589. It was followed by other schools for women, Colegio de Santa Isabel that opened in 1632. Other schools and colleges for girls were Santa Catalina, Santa Rosa, La Concordia. Several religious congregations also established schools for orphan girls who could not educate themselves. In 1611, Fray Miguel de Benavides, the third Archbishop of Manila, established the Colegio de Nuestra Señora del Santísimo Rosario, later renamed Universidad de Santo Tomas in 1645 by Pope Innocent X. In entirety, education during the Spanish regime was privileged only to Spanish students. The supposed Philippine education was only a means to remain colonizers. Meanwhile, several educated Filipinos referred to as ilustrados may consider one of the major effects in the change of the country's education and government system.
The Spanish period. During the Spanish colonial period in the Philippines, 1521 to 1898, the different culture of the archipelago experienced a gradual unification from a variety of native Asians and Islamic customs and traditions, including animist religious practices to what is known today as Filipino culture, a unique hybrid of Southeast Asian and Western culture, namely Spanish, including the Spanish language and Catholic faith. During the early years of Spanish colonization, education was mostly run by the church. Spanish friars and missionaries educated the natives and converted indigenous populations to the Catholic faith.
Spanish missionaries played a major role as to how Filipinos were educated and controlled. Religion was the tool Spain wielded to make the Philippines its colony. The first Christian school was built and established in Cebu year 1565 by the Augustinians. The school was separated for boys and girls, and only wealthy Filipinos were accommodated. According to King Philip II, Law of the Indies, Leyes de Indias, Spanish authorities were mandated to educate the natives to learn how to read, write, and to learn Spanish. Jesuits established the Colegio de San Ignacio and is now the Universidad de San Ignacio, the first college school for boys in Manila, year 1518. It was 1589 when the government entrusted the Escuela Pia and now is the Ateneo de Manila University of the Jesuits. In 1610, the first Filipino author, Thomas Pinpin, published a book in a baybayin entitled Librong Pag-aaralan ng mga Tagalog ng Wikang Kastila. Around 1630, when San Juan de Letrum was built for orphan boys, it took some time to establish college school for girls. Colegio de San Potenciana that was built in 1589 was the first, followed by the Colegio de Santa Isabel in 1632 that instituted Beaterio or nunnery. The sole purpose of this school is to provide education for orphan girls. The lesson is also about household chores such as cooking, embroidery making, sewing, and others that are necessary for good housekeeping. Public school was built in 1863 with the passage of the Education Reform Act due to the compulsory of education. Separated schools for boys and girls were established in every pueblo. Friars owned different schools in the country, ranging from the primary to the tertiary level. Ever since the Spanish government adopted the program of compulsory education in 1863, the education became free to all children between the ages of 7 to 13 years old. Curriculum then was a lot more structured compared to what the Philippines had before the Spaniards came. The curriculum must consist of Christian doctrine, values, reading and writing in Spanish, and Spanish history. The aim of education is to promote Christianity, Spanish language, and imposition of Spanish culture.
The friars controlled the educational system. During the Spanish times, the friars controlled the educational system since they owned different schools and reaching from the primary level to tertiary level of education. Aside of that, the friars used the power of religious order. The missionaries took charge in teaching, controlling, and maintaining the rules and regulations. These missionaries emphasized the teaching of Catholic religion starting the primary level. Holy Trinity in Christian doctrine is the unity of Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit as three persons in one Godhead. The doctrine of Trinity is considered to be one of the central Christian affirmation about God. The second one is the second coming and the last judgment of Christ. Christianity considers the second coming of Jesus Christ to entail the final judgment by the God of all people who have ever lived, resulting in the approval of some and the penalizing of others. Their primary goal of Catholic education is to prepare children for salvation. They also maintain the rules and regulations to impose to the student by the support of government. The parochial school was led by Dominicans and Jesuits. In the year of 1565, the Augustinians opened a parochial school in Cebu. The Franciscan is the first one who took the task in 1577. The Jesuits followed in 1587 as well as the Dominicans in 1587, setting up in Bataan. The church and the schools cooperated to ensure that Christian villages had school for students to attend. Establishment of normal school for male teachers under the supervision of Jesuits. Their normal school run by the Jesuits was also established, which given the men opportunity to study a 3-year teacher's education for the primary level.
First is the catechetical instruction, second is the use of corporal punishment, third is the rote of memorization, and the last one is the instruction was in dialect. Catechetical instructions, teaching religious principles by Christian answers. Examples, in giving catechetical instructions, their ignorance and blunders must not be allowed to expose them before your fellows, but must be covered. Use of corporal punishment is a discipline method in which a supervising adult deliberately inflict pain upon a child is a response to a child's unacceptable behavior and or inappropriate language. The immediate aims, such as punishment, are usually the help of offense, prevent its recurrence, and set an examples for others. And these are examples of corporal punishment. In corporal punishment, the adult usually hits various parts of the child's body with hands or with canes, paddles, yardstick, belts, or other objects expected to cause pain and fears. Rote of memorization is a memorization technique based on the repetition. The method rests on the premise that the recall of the repeated materials become the faster, more one that repeats it. Here are examples of rote memorization. Some of the alternative to rote learning includes meaningful learning, associative learning, is based on repetition, and active learning. Instruction was in dialect. In many countries, students from language minority communities are schooled in the national language such as English, Spanish, or Malay. And these are examples. Thus many students must simultaneously acquire a new knowledge of in this school and learn a new academic vocabulary and discourse practices. Teachers whose students are still acquiring the language of illustration often simplify their talk and augment verbal exposition with gestures, demonstration, and illustration.
Good day, Cluster 1, and welcome to Prof Ed Airlines. This is not your ordinary airlines where we're taking passengers to a journey filled with knowledge and enjoyment. I am Mariel Anavia.
I am Ivy Umuad.
Just call me Shen.
I am Ailenet Meresco Lemos.
And we will take you to the most unforgettable trip of your lives.
And at the end of this flight, your final destination is to appreciate the Americans' contribution to the Philippines' educational system.
Fasten your seatbelt, Cluster 1. We're ready to soar high.
During this trip, we offer you an informative video to keep you company all throughout this flight. Roll VTR, please.
Welcome to the Philippines during the American period from 1898 to 1935. Filipinos were just living their simple everyday life. When the Americans colonized the country, they imparted a remarkable influence in the Philippines' educational system. In this video, you will understand their impact on the lives and culture of Filipino people. As they introduced their American system of education, Filipinos benefited much from this.
You might be wondering, why did the Americans went to the Philippines? What were their intentions? Well, let me give you the brief history for that. Actually, their main point of coming here was because American expeditionary forces were tasked to do a mission. In the second pick, that was the time they destroyed the Spanish Armada ships as a strategy to defeat the Spaniards during the Spanish-American War. Fortunately, the Americans won. Then, the Treaty of Paris that was on December 10, 1898, paved the way for the Philippines to be ceded to US for a paltry sum of $20 million, meaning to say, this give the American government the authority to take control over our country. What do they teach? Americans focused on a uniform and centralized educational system. They also believe that education should be universal and free despite of someone's sex, age, religion, and socioeconomic status. Additionally, they taught Filipinos English efficiency. Oh, maybe that's the reason why us Filipinos sound like Americans more than American themselves. These are the colleges that were present during the American regime. These includes the Philippine Women's University, Far Eastern University, University of Manila, Silliman University, and Philippine Normal School. There were also vocational schools such as the Philippine Nautical School, Manila Trade School, and now called the Technological University of the Philippines, Central Luzon Agriculture School, and University of the Philippines. After we've discussed the schools that were present during the American regime, let's now proceed to the law supporting the Philippine educational system in this period, starting off with Act Number 74. A highly centralized experimental public school system was installed in 1901 by the Philippine Commissions. Then, they instructed the Secretary of Public Instruction to bring more than 1,000 teachers from the US to the Philippines. The same law was established for the Philippine Normal School, now called Philippine Normal University, to train aspiring Filipino teachers. Now, as you can see, we benefited much from this law. We also have the Act Number 372 that gives the provincial board an authority to establish secondary schools. Next in line, we have Act Number 1870, which was an act for the purpose of founding a university for the Philippine Islands, thus providing a higher and professional instruction. We also have Act Number 1381, or what we call the Gabaldon Law, which was passed in 1907 to create concrete school buildings for a fund of 1 million pesos. Lastly, we have the Reorganization Act of 1916, which was an act to instruct that all departments of secretaries except the Secretary of Public Instruction to be a natural-born Filipino.
Education system during the American period with regards to the four pillars of education. But before we start to the fourth pillar of education, let's answer this first. Education system during American period and why they teach. Okay, they teach to spread their cultural values. The colonial administration of the United States started to place a lot of importance on education. It enabled them to communicate with Filipinos and disseminate their cultural ideals, particularly the English language. This training in English and American history contributed to the development of Filipino nationalism and the nation's identity. Now, we had an answer in the question, so let us now proceed to the fourth pillar of education. The first pillar of education is learning to know. Education in American period is free for all. They don't have to pay anymore because it's free. Education means giving people an orientation toward the democracy was the method used to introduce people to a democratic way of life. The second pillar of education is learning to do. The curriculum gives importance to technical and vocational skills. Education became a very important issue for the United States colonial government since it allowed it to spread their cultural values, particularly the English language, to the Filipino people. Instruction in English language and American history lead to forming of a national identity and Filipino nationalism. The third pillar of education is learning to live together. Education emphasizes democracy and importance of people participation in decision making. The two are inextricably linked, the democracy and education. Inextricably linked, it means in a way that is unable to be separated, released, or escaped. Democracy cannot be seen in isolation from the educational range. Everyone agrees that the democracy's strength rests on the moral fiber and intellect of every one of its constituents. The last pillar of education is learning to be. Education in this period includes induction of good manner.
Hello everyone and welcome to Flight 1 Sector C. This is Jean Sandy speaking and I will be your flight attendant for this sector. Now that you have pretty much learned about the Philippine educational system during the American colonial period, let us tackle about the American teachers who taught the Filipinos during this era. But before that, let us talk about the very first Americans who became teachers to the Filipinos, which were the volunteered American soldiers. Volunteered American soldiers became the first teachers to us Filipinos, and it was part of their mission to build classrooms in every place where they were assigned, including remote areas like Sulu, Mindanao, and the mountain provinces. And it was in their attention to give vocational and health practices to the people. However, the American soldiers didn't remain teachers for long when the Thomasites arrived the Philippines in year 1901. Thomasites was the name given to the American teachers who traveled all the way to the Philippines boarding a ship called the USS Thomas. The original batch of the Thomasites was composed of 346 males and 180 females, who sailed from United States on year 1901. And after that, more American teachers followed the Thomasites in 1902, making a total of about 1,074 teachers stationed in the Philippines. It was not surprising that the United States considered educating the Filipinos in one of its top priorities in the Philippines. Even while the U.S. troops were consolidating their foothold in Manila in 1898, schools were already opened in the city, and unlike the Spaniards, who neglected to propagate their language, the Americans made it a point to teach English to the Filipinos, with the goal of being to educate and to train in the science of self-government.
Public system of education. Education became a very important issue for the United States colonial government since it allowed it to spread their cultural values, particularly the English language, to the Filipino people. Instruction in English language and American history led to forming of a national identity and Filipino nationalism. Every child from 7 was required to register in schools located in their own town or province. The students were given free school materials. There were 3 levels of education during the American period. The elementary level consisted of 4 primary years and 3 intermediate years. The secondary or high school level consisted of 4 years, and the third was college or tertiary level. The religion was not part of the curriculum of the schools, as it had been during the Spanish period. In some cases, those students who excelled academically were sent to the U.S. to continue their studies and to become experts in their own desired fields or profession. They were called scholars and pensionados because the government covered all their expenses. The Pensionados. The Pensionado Act is Act number 854 of the Philippine Commission, which passed on 26 August 1903. Passed by the United States Congress. It established a scholarship program for the Filipino to attend school in the United States. The word pensionado originated with the Spanish language. It means to receive pension from the government. As the Pensionado Act started in 1903, the purpose of this to educate and bring current and future Filipino leaders to the American colonial administration. In return, they were to teach or work in government offices. After they finished their studies, some example of these successful Filipino scholars were Judge Jose Abad Santos, Francisco Benetes, Dr. Honoria Sison, and Francisco Delgado. Francisco Francia Benetes. He was a famed educator. He belonged to the first wave of pensionados, or Filipinos sent to the United States to study. Benetes believed that educator can make the country stable and progressive, and that every Filipino child should have the right to an education in order to believe his potential to be full. Dr. Honoria Acosta Sison. She was the first Filipino woman to become a medical doctor. Dr. Honoria Acosta Sison, a woman who lived through 3 imperial regimes and undoubtedly played a major part in the medicalization of childbirth in the Philippines. Francisco Delgado. Francisco Afan Delgado was a Filipino diplomat who served as a resident commissioner from the Philippine Islands from 1935 to 1936. He was among the first group of Filipino students to study in the United States and a member of the brain aristocracy of his times, according to the later Observer.
This has been your flight
attendant for today, and see you on our next tour.
Good day, ma'am. Good day, everyone. What a pleasant day is it, right? Let me introduce myself first. I am Kevin John B. Lunsaga from Obtech M11. Today, we will going to talk about the educational system during the Commonwealth period. Before anything else, do you know that recalling the past educational acts of the Philippines will give us a glimpse of the past? We could also learn from it. It will help us understand how the past events or laws shape the present educational system and theories. And lastly, it will help us appreciate the law today. Without further ado, let's start the discussion. First, let us define what is Commonwealth period. So Commonwealth period is an era of 10-year transitional period in Philippine history from the year 1935 until the year 1945. After the American period, here comes the Commonwealth period, which lasted for 10 years. In addition, it was created by Tidings-McDuffie Act, approved by the U.S. Congress in the year 1934. In line with this, let me give you a brief background of the Tidings-McDuffie Act. According to Wikipedia, it is also known as the Philippine Independence Act. It is an act to provide for the complete independence of the Philippine Islands, to provide for the adoption of a constitution and a form of government for the Philippine Islands, and for other purposes. As cited from American Historical Association, Manuel L. Quezon is the first president of the Commonwealth period. He is one of the great leaders who contributed huge efforts for the Philippine independence. Let's proceed to the Commonwealth educational system. Education continued to receive from the Commonwealth government the same attention that the Americans gave it. President Quezon created the National Council of Education in 1936 as an advisory body on educational matters. The council made important recommendations to further improve the educational system in the Philippines. Most of these recommendations were accepted and carried out by the government. The fundamental aims of education, provided by the 1935 Constitution, is to develop moral character, civic conscience, personal discipline, and vocational efficiency. In addition, training was done through public and private schools during the Commonwealth period, and the methods used includes memorization, recitation, and socialized recitation. Moreover, the main goal of Commonwealth education was to develop these four major principles, which are moral character, self-discipline, civic conscience, and vocational efficiency. Under the Commonwealth, vocational and adult educations were given emphasis. It was also during the Commonwealth regime that an organized effort to develop a common national language was started in compliance with the mandate of the 1935 Constitution. In addition to that, to help counteract the American cultural influence among the Filipinos, President Quezon greatly encouraged the revival of native culture as well as desirable Filipino values, and to help strengthen the moral fibers of the Filipinos and to foster a love of the country, especially among the youth. President Quezon issued this famous code of ethics which was required to be taught in all schools.
Education continued to receive from the Commonwealth government the same attention that the Americans gave it. Commonwealth period were the reorientation of educational plans and policies to carry out the educational mandate of the Constitution. Now, let's learn about the Commonwealth Acts. What are the Commonwealth Acts? Commonwealth Act No. 1, amended by Republic Act 9163, known as National Defense Act, passed by the Philippine Assembly on December 21, 1935, which provided in Section 81 that preparatory military training shall be given with the youth in the elementary grade school at the age of 10 years and shall extend through the remainder of his schooling into college or post-secondary education. By virtue of Presidential Decree 1706, issued by the late President Marcos on August 8, 1980, otherwise known as the National Service Law, Commonwealth Act No. 1 was amended and required all citizens to render civic welfare service, law enforcement service, and military service. Commonwealth Act No. 80, an act creating the Office of Adult Education, enumerating its duties, defining its objectives, and providing funds for its operation.
This law created the Office of Adult Education on October 26, 1936, so as to eliminate illiteracy and to give vocational and citizenship training to adult citizens of the country. Executive Order No. 134 in 1937. In the presidential study of Malacanang Palace, President Manuel L. Quezon signs Executive Order No. 134 in 1937, proclaiming Tagalog as the national language. Witnessing this historic moment are officers from the National Language Institute, Cecilio Lopez, a member representing Tagalog and Secretary, Jaime C. de Vera, a president representing Samar Leyte Visayan, Santiago A. Fonesier, representing Ilocano, Dr. Rafael Palma, of Palma Hall fame in UP, and Felix S. Salas Rodriguez, representing Panay Visayan.
Executive Order No. 263 in 1940 required teaching of the national language in the senior year of all high school and all years in normal schools. The order also provided that the national language shall be taught 40 minutes a day as a regular, required 2-semester subject.
Hello everyone, I'm Ria Malima, and today I'm going to share a law regarding the legal basis of Philippines educational system that was implemented
and adopted by educational institutions. So before anything else, I'm going to share the aims of education during the Commonwealth period because my discussion today will be relevant to the Commonwealth Act number 589. In 1935, Constitution fundamental aims of education are the following. The first one is to develop moral character, personal discipline, civic conscience, vocational efficiency, and to teach duties of citizenship. So it means that the Commonwealth aim to develop individuals in all aspects. So from being a good person up to being responsible citizen of the country. Next is, education aims to continue the promotion democratic ideals way of life. So, that's not only aim to develop each individuals, that it also promotes the principle of democracy and as well as way of life. So now, since we already know the aims of Commonwealth, let's proceed to the main highlight of the discussion, which is the Commonwealth Act number 589. This law approved on 19th of August 1940 that was enacted by the National Assembly of the Philippines. This National Assembly of the Philippines, it refers to the Legislative of Commonwealth of the Philippines. And this act is also establishing a school ritual in which in all public and private elementary and secondary school. This Commonwealth is subdivided into 4 sections. The first section is the Department of Instruction is authorized to prepare and prescribe school rituals which shall be observed in all public and private elementary and secondary schools in the Philippines. So as what it said in Section 1, as we already observe in every morning or every afternoon in schools, there is a school rituals which student must be participate. So maybe it a prayer or any other activities. In Section 2, the school ritual shall consist of solemn and patriotic ceremonies and shall mainly include the singing of Philippine national hymn and the recitation by pupils or students, a symbol of a patriotic pledge prepared by a committee provided for in this act. The school ritual shall be held in the school or college premises as often as may be practicable under the direction of the respective school or college authorities. So that is why singing of Philippine national anthem and the pledge of patriotic pledge must be done because it is already seen in the section 2, which we are not taking it for granted, but we must be appropriately and solemnly done in educational institution. In Section 3, patriotic pledge must be prepared by a committee composed of the Secretary of the Public Instruction as chairman and the President of the University of the Philippines, the Director of Education and the Director of the Private Education as members. The patriotic pledge shall, before its adoption, be approved by the President of the Philippines. So it means in Section 3, the Educational Committee is working on a task in molding the learner's patriotism through the patriotic pledge. So this pledge is not just words that be spoken, but it serves as a promise that you are committed to your responsibilities as a citizen of the country. In Section 4, this act shall take effect beginning in the year of 1900 and 1941. So in this Section 4, it was implemented in 1900 to 1941, in which this act shall take effect allows school personnel to give feedbacks to the families regarding to the learners' emotional intelligence and how it affects their lives. So let's proceed to the Republic Act number 896, an act to declare the policy of elementary education in the Philippines, approved June 14, 1947. In this act, provides for compulsory education of 7 years and made it mandatory on the part of the parents to enroll their children in public school upon attaining the 7 years of age. The first section in this Republic Act, this act shall be known as the Elementary Education Act 1953.
Next is Section 2. In pursuance of them all, schools expressed in Section 5, Article 14 of the Constitution, and as amplified by subsequent legislation, it shall be the main function of the elementary school to develop healthy citizens of good moral character, equipped with the knowledge, habits, and ideals needed for a happy and useful home and community life. So in this section 2, it means that the main duty or the main goal of all schools is to develop good moral character, equipped with the knowledge, habits, and ideals that needed for a useful community.
Hi, my name is Rujin L. Makabudbud, and I'm going to discuss about the Commonwealth Act number 586, repealed by RA 896. This is known as Education Act of 1940. It was approved on August 7, 1940 by the Philippine Assembly. The law provided for the following: reduction of 7-year elementary course to 6-year elementary course, fixing the school entrance age to 7, and national support of elementary education, introduction of double single session, one class in the morning and another in the afternoon under one teacher to accommodate more children, and also compulsory attendance in the primary grades for all children who enrolled in grade 1. The law abolished grade 7 morning and afternoon class start from June to March instead of July to April. Opening should be June to March. So in this period, the calendar is also changed. And a teacher should manage its section. Next, Commonwealth Act number 108. This law was amended by the Commonwealth Act number 180, passed on November 13, 1936, which provided that the Secretary of Public Instruction was vested with power to supervise, inspect, and regulate said schools and colleges in order to determine the efficiency of instruction given the same. This was known as the law which made obligatory the recognition and inspection of said school and colleges by the Secretary of Public Instruction so as to maintain a standard of efficiency in all said school and colleges in the country. So the curriculum during Commonwealth period made important recommendation to improve the educational system in the Philippines. So that's all. Thank you for listening.